Hello and thank you for joining me today. I'm an accountant at Smart Business Solutions, and today I'll be showing you how to set up an employee in Xero. So I am already in the payroll tab under employees, and I'm going to head over to new employee, add employee. I'm going to start by entering in all of my new employees' details. Really smart of you to get all this information in advance. You don't have to go back to your employee to get any of this information. Now you can see here that some of these options are optional, so you don't have to key these in upon setup, but if you do have that information available, obviously do put it in, just because it is a really great way to, and I guess convenient for anyone that has payroll access to know exactly where they need to find information if they need to, which I'll show you in 1 second. So for example, your emergency contacts, even though these are optional, really convenient to have in the case of an emergency, and you know where to find them and not have to dig deep into your filing cabinet to find your emergency contact. So anything optional, still really relevant to get and enter in straight away. Now that I've entered in my email address, you can also invite your employee directly to the Xero Me app. If you're not too sure what this is, basically it gives access to your employees to view their pay slips, enter in their annual leave and sick leave requests, and also submit timesheets if timesheets is relevant for your business. And say for casual and part-time employees, you can have them submit their timesheets within Xero, and that is just one less thing for you to have to enter in the payroll system. Once I hit save, this has created my employee file. Now it's really, really important for you to view every single tab. So I'm jumping into employment now and viewing every item within that tab in detail to make sure that you're setting them up correctly from the start. Because if you don't set them up from the start, this can create issues down the track and actually cost you a lot of money in someone reviewing the file and I guess fixing anything that may have happened because of the setup. So from employment tab, again, reviewing every item. So selecting employment type. Most of the time you're going to have employees. The only time you're ever going to have a contractor tab is, say in the scenario you're paying certain contractors superannuation and you want to process that super through Xero, which is an option. But otherwise, most of the time you're always going to have this employee selected. The next item is selecting income type. You've got 3 options. Most of the time, again, you're going to have your salary and wages, but you've also got closely held payees, to say if it's the director on a wage within the business, making sure that you're selecting this option. And again, if you have someone on a working holiday maker visa, also making sure that you select this option as well. But for this example, this is just a regular employee that I'm setting up. So salary and wages. And then you've got your employment basis, which again is pretty straightforward as well. If you are setting them up and they don't start for a week, or maybe they started back last month, you can do this at any time. It's not today's date that you have to enter in. So say if my employee is not starting until next Monday, I can set this up in the system. You then have the payroll calendar option. Sorry, going back one. See, again, you're wanting to review every item. If you have the classification, this is optional, which is why I was kind of skipping it. But if you do have a classification, so if they're under a certain award, you can enter this information here. So then it is viewable on their pay slips as well. So for example, I can enter my classification and that will show up on my pay slip. But again, optional, don't need it, but if you have it, enter it in. Then you've got payroll calendars. So again, if you open this drop-down box and you see nothing, you will have to set up a calendar, so say if it's a fresh file. If you're not sure how to do that, definitely do engage your accountant or someone that's very familiar with Xero, because again, this can be quite tedious to set up, but hopefully you just have the 1 or 2, depending on how often you pay your, I guess, employees. These are the options that you'll see. If you see a lot of weekly calendars and you pay weekly only once to, one group of employees, might be worth reviewing these calendars and making sure they're up to date and marking any as inactive if you no longer use them. But in this example, my employee is on a weekly calendar. I'm going to pay them weekly, so I'm going to select weekly calendar. If you use grouping, this is where you'd also select it here. And even though this one is optional, really, I guess a good trick within Xero is selecting the state that your employee is based in. So I'm in Victoria. The reason why I do this, especially for part-time, full-time employees that get paid public holidays, is when I submit my annual leave request, if I have public holidays within Victoria but not in Queensland or vice versa, it's actually going to take into consideration where I'm based and what public holidays I'm going to get paid for. So coming up over the Christmas period, submitting my annual leave for the 2-week closure, it's not going to take my annual leave balance off for those public holidays. So really, I guess, important to select, especially if you've got employees in multiple states. Another really good trick within Xero is ticking this box here. So again, with the holiday season coming up, when I go to view my pay slip, in December, it's actually going to show me what holidays I was paid for. So, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, that type of thing. Otherwise, it actually just gets lump summed into their just regular earnings line, which I guess it's not easy for the employee to, I guess, review their leave and what they're getting paid for. So a really good trick is to tick that on all your employees. You then have your ordinary earnings rate to select. So when I was saying just before about not ticking this and it gets lump summed into just my normal earnings, this is what I'm talking about. It will just get lump summed here. So hopefully, again, you don't have too many of these when you select this drop down. Hard to avoid in certain industries. So like your hospitality industry might have multiple award earnings, but really trying to minimize how many earnings rates you have. So ordinary earnings, even if I have 10 employees that all get paid different rates, because we still get paid, I guess, based just on our ordinary time that we work, just at different rates, you only want to see the one here. You want to avoid setting different earnings rates up per employee unless they're very specific on awards, etc. So kind of think of it as a whole. The earnings rate is, I guess, the different classifications. And then within the employee file, that's when you'd update their salary or their hourly rate. This one's nice and easy though, because I just have the one ordinary hours earnings rate, bit of a mouthful. But again, that's probably the most common in most Xero files. You'll only have the one earnings rate, which will make a little bit more sense when I jump into their pay template. Again, optional, but do review it. Again, most of the time, no one's going to have access to approve and leave and timesheets. But if this particular person you are employing will be working, I guess, on the admin side of the business and you want them to have access to be able to approve leave and timesheets, then you can do this within this section as well. You then want to add super. So hopefully they are within a super fund that's already set up. Otherwise, you will have to jump in to the payroll settings, which I will show you how to do now. So I've just gone into the payroll settings down here, and you want to jump to the Superannuation tab. So if you think of it this way, under the payroll settings, it's very specific to the organisation or the business, whereas payroll employees is very specific to the actual employee. So you can see here that we've got multiple superannuation funds, but this isn't specific to the employee, which will make sense in 2 seconds. So add a superannuation fund. I'm, say, with Rest Super. This is where you would set up the superannuation fund just as a whole, but you would avoid entering in the employer number because, again, superannuation settings is specific to, I guess, the business, whereas the employment tab is specific to the individual, which is where I'd key in their specific membership details, etc. So payroll settings, superannuation, I'm just adding, I guess, just the fund. So again, Rest Super. If you go to search the name of their superannuation fund, but you see multiple, you're going to want to search for the USI, and hopefully they do provide you with the USI as well, because it's really, I do see often that you select the wrong super fund and then contributions do bounce back because you haven't selected the correct fund. This one's nice and easy though, because there is only one Rest Super. It's got the USI, and then I can add that from here. This doesn't automatically save, so because I have keyed in some information, I'm going to hit save and refresh my page. And then if I scroll back down to the very bottom where I want to add my superannuation fund for my employee, hopefully now I will be able to select my Rest Super fund. This is where I would then add the specific member number that I'll be sending the contributions to and hit add. And again, I'm going to pretty much save as I go, just because if something happens, I'm going to lose all the information I've entered in. So once we've finished off with the employment tab, moving over to the next tab, and again, every single item we're going to review. So I'm going to key in the tax file number if we did have it. If they've got a tax file number exemption, obviously you can key this in here, so under 18, etc. But most of the time, again, you're going to have the tax file number. Australian resident, this should be on their tax file number declaration, I believe. So making sure that you do select the Australian resident or foreign resident, because they do get taxed very differently. So important to get that one correct. You then have your tax scale. Again, most of the time it's always going to be regular unless you do fall within one of the other three. So in this scenario, we are on a regular tax scale. And again, this is where you would have your employee fill out that tax file number declaration. So hopefully you would know if they're claiming the tax-free threshold or not. Most of the time this will be a yes, but if this is their second job, they may be opting out of the tax-free threshold, because you generally will not claim this twice. If they have any student help loans or eligible for the leave loading per their award, this is also where you'll select it here, because this is very commonly missed. Moving to leave, this is a very, common area where a lot of businesses get wrong. So really important to set this one up correctly. If you assign default leave types, you will automatically get your annual leave and sick leave entered in here. Where the magic happens is actually within these settings. So if this was a part-time employee, so say this Erin Smart only actually works 10 hours a week, you still want to set this up as if they're full-time. This is because if they were to, say, work more hours during that week, it's over a busy period and they're working 20 hours rather than the 10, it's going to accrue their annual leave accordingly. So making sure that this is set up correctly. You can change these in payroll settings. So again, across the board, so every single employee you set up moving forward has the same. But if you are not working 38-hour weeks, it could be 37 and a half, it could be 40. You're going to change that accordingly. So again, reading every item in detail. So if they were a full-time employee, how many hours would they be working weekly? If you pay fortnightly, be again sure to read this correctly and update whether it's weekly or fortnightly. And then it's how many hours they get accrued annually. So generally annual leave is 4 weeks. So it would be 38 hours times 4 for 38-hour weeks times 4 weeks. You then also want to make sure for annual leave, this is selected as paid out. This is usually automatically done. Same with sick leave. Again, setting it up as if they're full-time, even if they are part-time. And again, paying attention to whether it's weekly or fortnightly, because this is generally based off your pay calendar selection. So again, this is a 38-hour working week, so that is correct, and we're confident to move on. Sick leave as well. And again, this is actually called personal/sick carers leave in Xero. Usually you do get 2 weeks, so 38 times the 2 weeks is 76. So again, that is correct. If you have a special contract and say they are entitled to 3 weeks of sick leave, you can always update in here. So again, it would be the 38 times the 3 weeks, and that would give me 114 hours, and that means they're going to be accruing the annual leave correctly. Even if they work less that week, again, this will be, like I said, this is where the magic happens and how the leave balances are calculated, but really important to get this one correct. You then have your bank accounts. So again, pretty straightforward. This is the actual text that gets received on their bank statement. So try to have it, specific to their wage. Then you have their account name, BSB account number, pretty straightforward. You can also add other bank accounts. So say if they want, $100 or $1,000 of their wage to go directly to a savings account, or maybe it's their mortgage account, you can actually set this up, and it doesn't make any extra entry into your admin side. If you pay via batch payments, it just automatically gets distributed to their bank accounts that they've opted into. Payslips, there's no payslips yet because obviously we haven't done a pay run for them yet. But if you ever need to go back and print out or review any payslips, this is the tab that you would need to go into, and this will show every single payslip you ever post. You then have the pay template, and again, the reason why I do click into them, because it's really important for you to get into the habit of making sure you're reviewing every single tab to make sure you're not accidentally missing anything. Because again, like I said, setting up an employee is a really hard area to master sometimes, and it can cause issues if you don't set it up correctly. So under the pay template, this is to avoid extra admin come pay run time. And I say pay run because that's what they call it within, it's actually called pay employees now. That's been there for a while. But a pay run is basically, what you post, your pay slip that you post every week or every fortnight. So to avoid you having to edit that every single time, especially if your employee is on the same salary, you want to make sure you get this pay template correct, so then it's a lot easier on the person processing the payroll. So firstly, adding earnings line. You have not two options, but under the earnings rate, this is where I want to find that earnings rate that I selected on the employment tab. So you can see here, when you have multiple earnings rate, you really want to make sure that you're selecting the correct one, because again, this is all what your annual leave is calculating on. So really important to get correct. And this is also, depending on how it's been set up in the background, how, like I said, leave is calculated, how pay-as-you-go tax withholding is calculated, and sometimes whether or not super is getting calculated or not as well. So really important to make sure you're selecting the correct earnings rate. And again, another reason why, to make sure you don't have too many of these going on in the background. So ordinary hours is the one we selected in the employment tab. So that's the one that we want to select here. If they do often get bonuses or overtime, you can actually have them sitting in the pay template ready for you to enter in how many hours they do per week or per fortnight. The ordinary hours is the standard, so I am going to select that one. And then you have two options. So you have your hourly rate option, or you've got annual salary. So if they were on a salary, I can enter, their yearly salary, and that would automatically calculate. If I go back. And if you want to make any changes, anything with a blue kind of hyperlink, you can open up. So if I go to salary, say I'm on a $50,000 salary, and like we did previously under our leave tab, so again, making sure everything kind of syncs and matches. If we're working 38-hour weeks per our leave, we're going to make sure we're putting the 38 hours in this box as well. If this ever changes to be 37.5, and that is considered full-time and not moving down to part-time, we also need to update our leave tab as well. But for this one, 38 hours, and you've got our annual salary, and then this will automatically calculate the, the hourly rate within the pay slip as well. If this was on an hourly basis, like just a regular wage employee, not a salary, again, 38 hours working week, and you could say enter in the hourly rate or whatever that might be. Here is where you add your superannuation earnings line. Again, this is standard, so you want to make sure you do this for every single employee. You want to always make sure that you're selecting, and again, it automatically does this, but the SGC, Super Guaranteed Contribution, and you always want to make sure that you're selecting the statutory rate. This is because every time the superannuation law changes, and it changes, which it will do for the next couple of years on 1 July, currently 11.5%, it will move up to 12%. This will change in the background and make sure you're always compliant with how much you're paying in employee superannuation. This is all standard as well. Your payment frequency is always due quarterly. It's always due the 28th of the following month of the quarter end. But if you do want to pay monthly, you can always edit this within here. But as a standard, it's always set up based on, when it is actually due, and hit save. You do have the option to add deduction lines. Again, this is probably always a once-off thing, so you don't have to do it within the template. But if they say have any of these options here, union fees, for example, if this gets deducted weekly as well, you can set this up if it is regular. If it's not regular, not worth doing. I won't jump into the opening balances. This is only relevant if you're moving softwares. And again, I would highly recommend seeking advice from your accountant to make sure this is entered correctly. But I will jump into notes. So notes is a really convenient spot, again, to have everything in the one spot. So So you can add a note for every time, the employees change from part-time to full-time, vice versa, or anytime their hourly rate changes. This just keeps a really nice place to keep all the history on that specific employee. Otherwise, once this is all set up, if it's all set up correctly, you are pretty much ready to go and post their very first payslip. Any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.